Yep.
Hello, this is Jeff Gaudiosi, and you're on misplacedstraws.com, where music comes to life. My guest today is making his fourth appearance on the site, but this is the first time we actually get to talk face to face. He's about to release his 27th solo record called Surrender of Silence, which is actually his second release so far this year. Please welcome the one and only Steve Hackett. Welcome, Steve.
Hi there, Jeff. How are you? How are you
I'm
doing?
doing great. So earlier this year, we spoke as you were releasing just the beautiful Under a Mediterranean Sky. And that was the first time that you really put a record together remotely, thanks to the pandemic. Is it safe to say that since you followed it up so quickly that you're kind of embracing this new way of making a record?
Well, yeah, I think so. The idea of working at home and it's almost like kind of being a satellite, isn't it? Um, Performances are being beamed in from everywhere, and whereas at one time records were made with people face to face, when you're trying to work with someone from Azerbaijan who's connecting you with someone from Tajikistan, and you've got a drummer in the States, you're working with this kind of United Nations approach, and to travel has been, a musician's birthright for hundreds of years, and then suddenly we're like sort of, in terms of social conditions, we're back in, the era of the Black Death, the plague, and
Yeah.
so do we allow ourselves to be ground to a halt? How does it work for filmmakers? God knows. But one studio is the size of one's computer, and it is possible for people to fly in their performances, and many of these performances have been world class, and so it makes a record possible under these conditions, but it's had to be more of a test tube baby than the act of getting together, all making love in one room together, making music together. It's not been quite like that. These are different times, but it's made for some very different kind of sounding efforts from us all.
And the last record was classical nylon string. This record, Surrender of Silence, is undoubtedly a rock record, but it still has a lot of those classical elements in it. The beginning part of relaxation music for sharks, the drums and the strings. Did some of the writing of the two records kind of bleed together because they're so close?
Well, if I'm honest, ever since the Beatles started working with orchestras, it changed my mind about what was possible, or what was credible for a rock act to do. It might sound like heresy, but see, I grew up listening to rock. I listened to blues, R&B. That was the tradition I came from. But at the same time, I was listening to Segovia and classical music, like a guilty pleasure, thinking, I love this stuff, but it's not going to impact upon rock. And then it did towards the end of the 1960s, and really from 67, perhaps 66, 67, where people were showing their classical leanings. I thought in a way that music would continue in that way, but instead of which it's become ever more homegrown. So most people these days make a record with just two people. The programmer is probably the producer, and the singer is someone else, and they come together and they make a hit record. That's what they do. Where does that leave the rest of us who've spent a lifetime working on our craft? And where does it leave music? It leaves music impoverished, and you have to look to these other genres to dress the music differently, I think. And then there's been the whole sort of phenomenon of so-called world music, and I allow that to affect me because I love working with friends from all over the world, whether they play the tar, the dutar, the sitar, the guitar, the drums. whatever, you know, a lot of these things may be unfamiliar instruments to some. And so it's been an education for me, just working with pals all over the world and in different styles. So on one level, I'm working with a Vietnamese instrument that I learned to play on the beginning of one track. Um, and so it goes on, and then the same theme is taken up by a lady playing the viola, playing it in an Oriental style, and it makes for almost like a sort of soundtrack to an imaginary movie, but the movie is for the ear rather than the eye. Although I'm involved in funnily enough, videos these days, a lot of the time it gets farmed out because I can't possibly do everything myself. But there's been some interesting videos that have come up already around this album, and there's a new one that I've just seen that a cartoon maker has done around the track Natalia, and we've gone to town with the Russian sort of oppressive regime thing, and that looks really quite stunning. And I'm very interested in the different approaches that different filmmakers